welcome to the PrePost Film Review. I'm Jon Asquith.
And I'm Matt Stevenson. So the way things work here at PrePost is that the first thing you're going to hear is Jon and myself chatting about Mission Impossible Fallout before we've seen the film. We haven't watched the trailer for this one, but we're going to be talking about the other Mission Impossible films and what our sort of expectations and predictions are for this new film Fallout. So the first part's going to be spoiler-free, so you can listen to that before you've seen the film if you like. But then it's going to jump forward in time, and the second half of the podcast is going to be Jon and myself reviewing Mission Impossible Fallout, which will be chock full of spoilers right from the get-go. So don't listen to the second half until you've seen the film.
Did you ever choose not to? The end you always feared is coming. And the blood will be on your hands. The fallout of all your good intentions.
You had a terrible choice to make in Berlin. One life over millions. And now the world is at risk.
This is the CIA's mission. If he had held on to the plutonium, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
And his team would be dead.
Yes, they would. That's the job.
Okay, well, we're here to chat about our sort of expectations for Mission Impossible Fallout, Matt, and a brief sort of retrospective on the previous films as well. That is, if I am talking to you, Matt, or are you wearing a mask?
Spoiled the twist. Halfway through the pod, I was going to pull my mask off and reveal that it was someone else underneath.
Yeah, it's the running sort of thing in all these movies is like, I'm this person, or am I? Actually, yes, I am. Oh wait, no, I'm not. That's sort of like every movie has at least two of those scenes in it.
Yeah, totally.
So we'll try and get some of those going in the pod as well. But anyway, we as you said in the intro, we're not watching the trailer for Mission Impossible Fallout because we're a bit worried that it's going to spoil things because so much of what is thrilling about this series is sort of the money shots and what Tom Cruise, what crazy situation Tom Cruise can throw himself into, and so we're a bit fearful of that. But in preparation for seeing Mission Impossible Fallout, I know that you went back and rewatched all of the films up until now. I did. So I'm curious what your thoughts are upon that little retrospective that you gave yourself.
Yeah, it was a fun little exercise I decided to do. And I hadn't seen most of the Mission... I mean, I'd seen the recent ones whenever they were released, but the first few... I couldn't tell you the last time I saw them. Probably Mission Impossible 2, the last time I saw it was in cinemas when it came out.
Yeah, that's the case for me.
Yeah. So I didn't have very vivid memories. Even the J.J. Abrams one was pretty foggy in my memory. It was more the more recent ones that I could remember a bit more vividly. So it was great going back, and it's really interesting watching the progression of the series and how it changes from film to film, because they are quite different, especially at the beginning. So yeah, it was really good. I would say that after watching all of them, I did have some clear favourites. The first one in particular stood out just because that is probably the most different, in that it's much slower paced and it's much more of a sort of spy noir film than any of the others. And it does some sort of weird... I remember it having a reputation of being quite hard to follow, and it does do some odd things in terms of like the voiceovers telling you one thing, but visually on screen you're seeing something else happen. So it's quite confusing if you're not following the story, quite intently. But I actually liked those devices because they were quite unique and interesting. But yeah, it's just a very different film, much more talky. But having said that, the key action scene the heist scene with them breaking into Langley or whatever they do, where the famous bit where he's hanging from the wire, is so good. Like, it was so much better than I remembered it. Like, I guess it's been parodied so often that you kind of just think it's a bit of a cheesy 90s action cliche, but it's so white-knuckle tense. Like, it's shot with no music, so it's almost completely silent, and it's not the most impressive stunt, but it's like a good stunt, you know. And the way Tom Cruise sort of hangs an inch from the floor after the rope slips and he gets caught just before he touches it, and he does this weird like flailing thing with his arms and his legs to like keep himself stable, and you can just see he's like physically like exerting himself to be able to do that. It's really, really tense and really impressive. It was really great. And it is also notably the only film to use masks in like a realistic way. Like, when Tom Cruise has a mask on, he like has a mask on in the film, so you can kind of tell. For the most part, or for at least one scene anyway. But yeah, I really liked the first one. It was much better than I had anticipated, and I thought it was going to be good. Like, I had fond memories of it. I just didn't expect to like it as much as I did. But the contrast between that and the second film couldn't be more stark. Like, the second film is by far the weakest. Like, it is kind of actively bad. I don't remember hating it at the time. I think I actually remember quite liking it when it came out, but it has not aged well. It reeks of 90s action movie cliche, like, not in a fun, good way.
It was very very cool even at the time. It was sort of on trend with like musically, cinematography, like all that stuff. Like, I remember like seeing it at the cinema and liking it too, but I was like 14 or something, you know, and it was like target demographic.
Totally.
I haven't seen it since, but I could imagine it has aged terribly.
Like Tom Cruise like throws his like Oakley sunglasses at the camera as they explode. Like, it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough. And it is the one that felt most like it was trying to be James Bond in a really bad way. Like, there's almost like a Bond girl in Thandie Newton, and it's also like it's a little bit gross and sexist in a way that Bond used to be, that we've sort of moved past now. I mean, the one good thing about it, I will say, is the Australian location. Like, it is just so refreshing to see Sydney in a big budget action film like that. Yeah. Which is quite cool. But other than that, it's pretty ropey. Even the action scenes, a lot of the internal stuff feels very setty. Like, you can very obviously shot in sets, and it was a pretty tough set, to be honest. But then, other than one, the third film, the Abrams one, was my other favourite. And that almost swings hard back in the other direction. It's the first and probably only one, I would say, that was actually sort of interested in character. And it's about his relationship with his wife, like Ethan Hunt's relationship with his wife. And that's the sort of driving force behind the whole film. Has much more heart to it, or has more heart than any of the other films. Like, it sort of has the domestic opening stuff where he's retired from the MI team, whatever it's called, IMF.
IMF,
IMF. And he's sort of living the domestic lifestyle with his wife and all that. I think he's a training or something. Anyway, so you get to see a side of Ethan that you don't see in the other films. They kind of strip him of that over-the-top coolness that he had in the second film and sort of try to bring him down to a more human level. And also, it's just a great example of how good Abrams is at directing action. Like, if anything, if the second one was reminded me of a Bond film in a bad way, I mean, this is a compliment in the third one. It reminded me of something more akin to Indiana Jones, or something Spielbergian in the way Abrams directs the action, which perhaps isn't a surprise given how, like, much his films hark back to that sort of cinema. But he just has this great talent of escalating the stakes within the action scenes, where they just sort of keep keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse for Ethan as it sort of snowballs until he finds some way of getting out of it. So I really enjoyed all that, and it's uniquely shot too. It has a very surprising color palette, like strong. The lighting has a lot of like really vibrant colors in it, which the other first two films didn't have. That. I mean, almost to the point of being distracting, but I kind of liked it, that it was making a bold, different choice. Also, lots of lens flares. So it was still when Abrams was in his lens flare love affair days.
I think it's interesting too. Sorry to interrupt you there, but just the idea of this isn't an original thought, but the idea of J.J. Abrams as like the reboot master. And that the franchise really, no one was sure, from memory, whether it was going to come back, and it was a long stretch between 2 and 3, because 2 kind of damaged the brand a bit, I guess. And it took J.J. Abrams to sort of come in and like reboot things and like get it off to a fresh start.
That's funny. I didn't think of that.
With Star Trek and Star Wars as well. Yeah,
that's a very good point. I never thought of it like that, but it very much is sort of like a soft reboot, especially of Ethan's character and. I guess the series in general, and that other than Ving Rhames, who's in all of them, that introduces us to Simon Pegg's character, who's now subsequently been in all the films. So it is a bit of a soft reboot in the sense of the team, the IMF team. So they were the two standouts. The first and the third, I think, were hands down for me the best of the 5. And then there was the Brad Bird one is good, Ghost Protocol, but perhaps not quite as good as I'd remembered it. Or maybe it was just in comparison, the J.J. Abrams one was so much better than I'd remembered it, that Ghost Protocol suffered. Though having said that, I think Ghost Protocol has the best sequence out of all 5. That the Burj Khalifa building sequence is just stunning. Yeah. Like, both visually and just in terms of the suspense filmmaking, like the way things go wrong. Talking about escalating tensions, like first the glove failing, and then when he finally does the jump out, and you think he's figured it out with the fire hose or whatever he uses as the rope to rappel down. Then he realizes that it's too short and he can't quite get to the window, and he has to do a running jump and let go, and then even then he misjudges the height and like half hits the top of the window and almost falls out. Like it's that you just get the sweats just thinking about that scene. It's breathtaking.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. So that for me was a good reminder of like the peaks that this film has gone to in terms, and it's sort of, to be fair, that film has set the bar or set the standard for what the films now are, I think.
I agree with that.
The tone and the big stunt moments, which seems to be what Mission Impossible is now known for, were kind of the template for that was the Brad Bird Ghost Protocol entry. But other than that, I thought it was actually kind of forgettable and a really boring villain. Like, even having just watched them, I couldn't really tell you much about him at all. It's all pretty forgettable. It's that climactic action scene in the car park with all the cars moving. While it's got some interesting ideas in it, after coming off the skyscraper scene, it's just nothing can live up to that. It's all a bit sort of downhill from there. And then the latest entry, Rouge Nation, I really liked as well, but I think again I remembered it a little bit more fondly than I experienced rewatching it. And having said that, I still really liked it. It has some like amazing set pieces, but none that match Ghost Protocol's stunts. I love that Rouge Nation opens with perhaps the best stunt of the film. Like that's a really great, thrilling cold open, and it's a good example of what a difference practically doing stunts makes. I think I sort of briefly spoke about this off pod, but there's a little moment in that stunt where Tom Cruise is just hanging off the side of the plane and the plane banks, and the sunlight comes around and just like crosses. I don't know if it hits Tom or if it just goes across the side of the plane or whatever. It's not even a moment. It's not meant to be a thing. It's just like what happens when the plane turns. But just there is something visually different about sunlight, and knowing that he's actually it just makes all the difference that you can tell
Your
he's
brain
actually
knows that's
100%. There's something a little like that makes such a huge difference. So that's a really cool open, and the introduction to Rebecca Ferguson's character, who I'm blanking on her name, is great. Like, she's a enormous plus for that film. I think she's almost comes out of that as like the MVP of the film. She's amazing, and her look is such a like harks back to old classic Hollywood movie stars or something. There's something about her that is just electric. I don't know. I love watching her on screen, and that opera scene is pretty stunning, I think. The other big set piece, which is the underwater heist that they kind of do to steal the whatever it was, the memory stuff, whatever, hard drive or something. I can't remember now.
Data chip or something.
I think, I think suffers due for two reasons. One, I mean, knowing what happened behind the scenes, that Tom Cruise like literally learnt to hold his breath for like fucking 6 minutes or something ridiculous, which is mind blowing. But I think the film fails to take advantage of that, and I think like it feels a little CGI under that water. Like, I think the arm that's swinging around, makes it feel a little fake, and the fact that they intercut the scene with some other stuff ruins if they'd done it all as a one take sequence, which I think I've listened to interviews with Christopher McQuarrie, the director, and they said they tried that and it didn't work. Like, I think they shot it like that, but it didn't work in terms of pacing for the film. So maybe it's just inevitable that they had to do it this way, but it's a bit of a shame, because if you didn't know that he was actually holding his breath for that long, it seems like it's a very easy thing to fake. Then you would assume he didn't do it. Which is a shame, because I feel like that's kind of like the big moment of that film, and it doesn't quite have the impact that it could have. But yeah, other than that, I think it's really, really solid. I mean, this series is just unbelievable how good the bar is in terms of quality for each one.
It's amazing.
Like, who would have thought, right? Like, it has no reason to be this. It's like a remake of a 60s TV show that... I don't know. It's just mind-blowing that they've managed to keep the quality, so with the exception of the second film, or whatever, I suppose.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I guess, having said all that, expectations for the new film are pretty high. I mean, it's interesting that they've got Christopher McQuarrie coming back, because this is, one of the hallmarks for the series has always been sort of Tom Cruise picking a new director. I mean, it's kind of his baby, this series. It's his like legacy, so I feel like he has quite a lot of creative input, and he chooses the directors he wants to be on each project. So it's interesting that we've got the first one that returning, and it seems to be Rogue Nation hints a little bit towards previous storyline, or is it Rogue Nation, or maybe I get them confused now. Ghost Protocol, actually, I think hints slightly towards there being continuity between them, in the sense that you see Michelle Monaghan's character very briefly at the end, with Ethan's kind of like keeping an eye over her, because it's implied throughout the whole film that she was killed, but in fact it was just a cover so she could safely escape the life of being a spy. Because it was kind of dropped at the end of because after the third one they like happily married and run off into the sunset, and then the fourth film they kind of just completely retcon that whole thing. Anyway, it feels like this new film, Fallout, having not watched the trailer, but from what I understand, it has the same villain, and there's some like direct story continuity and repercussions from the final scenes of Rogue Nation. So I'm very curious as to what they're going to do there now, what they're going to do now with that. But that's probably enough from me. I'm curious what you thought, because you not rewatched but watched Rogue Nation for the first time, John. So I'm interested to hear what you thought of that and what your expectations for Fallout are.
Well, thanks for that recap, by the way, Matt. That was really good, and actually jogged my memory a bit on the earlier films. because like you said before, you had rewatched them. I haven't seen most of them since their cinema release. I've seen bits of Ghost Protocol again, so that's fairly fresh in my mind. But yeah, certainly the others I'd forgotten quite a bit. So it was nice to have that little recap there. And yeah, I sort of almost thought I had seen Rouge Nation over since its release, weirdly. But I think I was thinking of parts of Ghost Protocol. Anyway, with Fallout coming up, I realized, actually, I haven't seen that. I missed it at the theater, and never got a chance to watch it at home. So yeah, I got to finally see that recently, and really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was just a fantastic bit of action filmmaking. And you're so right about that shot on the plane, which is within the first 10 minutes or so, I guess, of the movie. Once that happened, I was like, okay, this is going to be really good, because that is amazing already. You're like, that's that's worth a few bucks that I gave to Google to rent it. Like, totally. It's so impressive, and I think one of the most impressive shots that. Certainly in that film, as you mentioned, but just in the series in general, like, it's so visceral, and it's not even like he's already in the air and gets blown out and then holds on. It's like from the ground up into
you see the whole takeoff,
force, like I just can't imagine what that would feel like. Obviously, he's strapped in, and they would remove the wires and straps and stuff, but he's still there. Like, that is Tom Cruise doing that. Yeah. And like the force he must feel on his face and body, and that, as we all know, just being in a plane when it takes off, you kind of get a weird feeling in your stomach, and it's it's a bit unsettling. It feels weird to be leaving the ground. So I mean, yeah, that shot is just incredible. But then the rest of the movie doesn't quite live up to that moment, but there are so many other great action set pieces throughout it. I completely agree about the Rebecca Ferguson character, and her performance in general is really good. Female version of Ethan Hunt, I guess. They're sort of this yin and yang that keep crossing paths and are able to do amazing things. They're both superheroes. I mean, that's really what the franchise is turning into, is like Ethan Hunt in particular is just like this Superman that can fucking do anything, which I love. I think it's they can pull it off well, so it's great. So that was great. That was really great to see that recently, and it's really pumped me up for Fallout. I would just echo what you've said, mostly in terms of expectations. I think we've got the same director coming back, and same cast again, it seems, same characters. So I'm expecting more of the same, and that's a good thing. I'm not sure how they're going to top some of the stuff that has come before in the series, in terms of tension and stunts. As you mentioned before, it sort of has become about what crazy thing can Tom Cruise do. But I have faith that they'll be able to do something. I'm pretty excited to see this one.
Totally. I feel like worst case scenario, right? At least you get to see some crazy stunts, and that's kind of worth the price of admission alone, even if the film itself might be a bit ropey.
Yeah, I mean, you're not watching these films for... I mean, the plot is intricate in the sense that most of the movie, you're like, I don't really know what's going on right now, who they're chasing, or what secret group is this. But I'm loving the visuals, and the character sort of interplay in the team, like, is fun. And the scores are always, cool. And whenever that theme, kicks in, and Tom Cruise is like running and jumping and stuff, like... I mean, it is great action filmmaking, and as long as the plot holds together well enough to keep them moving from place to place around the world, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's jump forward and see what we thought about Fallout, John.
Please don't make me go
Okay.
How many times has Hunt's government betrayed him, disavowed him, cast him aside? How long before a man like that has had enough?
You can't fight the friction, so you can't take the pressure, so
Ethan, that's not who we are.
maybe we need to reconsider that.
All right, John. So we've both now seen Mission Impossible Fallout, the 6th entry in the Mission Impossible franchise. We're both pretty excited. We've both done a little bit of homework and watched some of the earlier films before seeing this one, so I'm super curious. Did you like Mission Impossible Fallout? And I guess given that you just watched Rogue Nation, did it live up to your expectations? Was it better than or worse than Rogue Nation? Tell us.
Okay, I think Mission Impossible Fallout is fantastic. It's really good. It's a really fun action film. I think it's. I have in my note here. Cheesy art, expertly crafted, and that kind of sums up this movie. I feel like in many ways this is the cheesiest. I mean, having said that, let's ignore the second film. I haven't rewatched that.
Right.
So I guess ignoring the second film. There's some moments in here that are. I mean, they're all pretty cheesy, but there were some moments in here that stretched it a little bit. Even for this franchise. But as my note says, cheesy art, expertly crafted, because it is, again, like pretty much they've knocked it out of the park, and that is just unbelievable. I feel like they could make another. Like I wouldn't be worried if they, and I kind of want them to go on and make a 7th. Why not? You're still doing so well. I had a great time watching this. Like I was, there were moments, particularly towards the end, where I was laughing watching it out of just sort of the joy of
pure
how
joy.
over the top and crazy it was getting. And I was by myself too. I was not like I was there with friends or anything. I was just like laughing like a crazy man in the theater by myself. I think it's interesting that you bring up the comparison to Rogue Nation, because I had watched that so recently. I think this doesn't quite reach the heights of that film. And I felt like this opens with sort of like a fake out scenario, which the Mission Impossible films are very good at doing, but they're not as viscerally exciting in terms of just as an opening. And so I found that it took a little while to get the sort of ball rolling on this one, as opposed to something like Rogue Nation, which has that great plane sequence at the start.
Right.
But once it gets going, I was totally on board. I think Tom Cruise proves again that he's insane in the best way, and we get lots of him falling and being up really high and running across the rooftops of London, and I had a big goofy grin on my face from start to finish. So. I do have some more specifics here that we can get into, but before we do that, I'll throw it over to you, Matt. I have a feeling that you're probably on the same page, but I'd like to hear your thoughts and perhaps where this would fit for you in the series.
Okay. I'm glad to hear you liked it, John, because I love this film. I think it's hands down the best Mission Impossible film. I would go so far as to say I think this is the best piece of action cinema this side of The Dark Knight and Mad Max Fury Road. I think I had such a good time. I've seen it twice now, and I would... I'm keen to see it a third time in cinemas before it. I want to see it in IMAX before it leaves cinema screens.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
I think it took the favourite previous Mission Impossible films, 1 and 3, and sort of built on both those. It has all the crazy stunts that you... Just backtrack a little bit. I think this is probably a good example of a film kind of being more than the sum of its parts in a way, because individually, like, I don't think it has the best stunt. Like the Dubai Tower is still the best stunt in the series. But I think it comes up with a concoction of enough things that makes it better than the rest. I think it has the twisty, turny, crazy noir storyline of the first Mission Impossible, but in a more action-focused film. It has, like, it still has insane stunts. Like, the skydiving scene is amazing, though I guess we can talk about that a bit specifically later on. I think that the CGI that they use hampers it a little bit. But the final stuff with the helicopter is mind-blowing. I mean, even just Tom running through London is incredible. But then it also, on top of all that, it takes, I think, the character stuff of the third film, makes it matter, and then actually builds a film around an idea and a character's journey that none of the other Mission Impossible films do. Like, it's about Ethan and about what his beliefs are and what the consequences of his actions are, that none of the other films have been bothered with any sort of character stuff like that. And this is all about character. Like, it's just something that I didn't expect that Mission Impossible films would be about. And then that's kind of what reminded me a lot of The Dark Knight. I mean, tonally, I think it's got a lot of Nolan in it. It feels Dark Knighty. It's the darkest of the Mission Impossible films. But also, having said that, it has bursts of humour that a Nolan film doesn't have. Like, it's still got Simon Pegg. Like, there's moments of, like, laugh out loud funniness. And you mentioned the beginning of it not opening with a big stunt, which I agree, but I liked the slow burn open of it. And it totally had me hook, line and sinker. Like, I thought that the bombs had gone off. And I was just like, holy shit, like, they've called it Fallout because it is literally about the fallout of these attacks happening. And then when and it's it's probably a good, like, 15 minutes or so, and then from the beginning of the film, this cold open, then the walls fall down and it's all the ruse, and then it's like, then the soundtrack kicks in and there's title, I can get goosebumps just thinking about it. Like, it's such a great moment. But then from what made me compare it to Mad Max Fury Road is that, one, the practical stunts, like Mad Max Fury Road is all practical, this is all practical, but also just the sense of momentum, like, from that moment, and you realise it's only been 2 hours since the failed plutonium drop. It's like the film just puts its foot on the accelerator, and it's like, it almost feels real time. Like, it just goes, they get in the plane, they jump down into the nightclub, then they chase, like, get in the boat, it's just, there's not even a pause for a breath. Like, you're just following literally every single thing that they do in a sequence until they jump to Kashmir, and there's like a slight time jump of however they got to Kashmir. But from then, the pace of it is, like, unlike any other action film other than Mad Max Fury Road, which is just relentlessly charging forward. Anyway, so clearly I'm, like, over the moon about this film, John. I love it. I want to see it again. I just have so much fun with it. Like you said, it is. It's like cheese, but made expertly, because it's like, you know. Actually, and on top of all that, shot on film, looks gorgeous. Like, the opening shot of just Tom Cruise on that little bunk bed, and it's got, like, the lens flare of the red, like, heating element that just, like, goes across the center of the screen. There's all these little, like, lens flare-y 35mm moments. I think it's by far the best looking of the series, and it's a big jump up visually from the previous film. Yeah, loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Well, that's. I wouldn't have expected you to say that it's the best in the series, Matt. But that's very heartwarming to hear, and I'm glad you had such a good time. As did I. You know, it's like, it's kind of hard to pick a favorite amongst the top tier of these movies, because they all have such good, interesting. Yeah, exactly. Such interesting things going on. I'm curious what you thought of. You sort of touched on the the skydiving scene.
Yes.
So I've got that in my notes here too, and how that almost felt like it had the potential to be one of these sort of jaw-dropping moments or stunts in the series, but I totally agree that it's hampered a bit by the CGI. And I felt that, you know, the initial shot where you fall out of the plane with Tom Cruise was incredible. But then sort of as soon as you pan down and he's trying to catch Henry Cavill, there's like CG clouds and they're stitching shots together, and it's sort of quite obvious. And it ends up ultimately, I think, feeling more kind of like a video game cutscene. And so whilst the start of that sequence was very impressive to me, by the end I was sort of left feeling like I'm not sure if they handled it in the best way. I'm not sure how else they could have done it, given that they did literally drop, you know, however many times, 3 or 4 times, and then stitch it together. But yeah, I'm curious whether, you know, what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree to an extent. I think my memory of it was far worse than what the reality of it is. So when I rewatched it, I was actually very pleasantly surprised that it looked a lot better than what I remembered it looking. But yeah, I agree. It's a shame that they CGI'd it because it is all real, and it's apparently three shots stitched together. Tom Cruise did the jump apparently 106 times so they could get all 3 shots. 106 times. So they did it like a couple of times each day because they had to do it at dusk. So it was at a specific time, so they could only do a couple of jumps each day because the sun's right on the horizon line. Over like however many months they were filming it until they got all the footage they needed. So I agree, it's a shame that the clouds make it look a bit CGI-y, but having said that, I feel like you can still tell, and especially on the rewatch, the way that the bodies, like, they move in space, like, you couldn't do that in a wind tunnel, and like the way they float around and the amount of mobility is pretty mind-blowing. And I also just like, it's a good example, of what I think this film does through most of, if not all, its action scenes, is it uses the action to also like build and develop character a little bit. Like, it's also about the tension between him and Henry Cavill, and there's like a little narrative within that action scene. It's not just action for the sake of action. So I think that's really, really well done, even if perhaps the execution is not perfect. I feel it suffers a little bit from like what I said about Rouge Nation, in that the CGI hampers what was an incredible stunt. It's just a bit of a shame. I think that was shot out over the desert or something in Dubai or something crazy as well, so I guess they needed a cityscape underneath in order for it to make sense for the narrative or whatever. So that's I guess why they chose to do it that way, because I think it was probably also safety or whatever, I don't know why they shot it out over the desert.
I must say too, like, in the moment at the start of that sequence when Henry Cavill like pulls out Tom Cruise's like oxygen hose or whatever, I found that to be like pretty extreme. You know, I know ultimately his character's, you know, quite dodgy and, you know, the villain, but in that moment he's not revealing himself.
Right. Yes.
And they're kind of like they're trying to like, you know, test each other out and like one up each other and stuff. But in the moment of watching it, I was like, "Oh, come on, settle down! Like, he could die. He could just fall out."
Totally.
Yeah, that pushed it a bit. But I really like that point that you bring up. That then there is this mini narrative where, okay, he's been like a prick to Ethan. Yeah. But then during the fall, Ethan sees that he's unconscious and has to save him, and then like they land, and he doesn't get any thanks or anything like that. You know, like
totally.
Still like
and it's like it builds, or it's an actualizes Ethan's character motivation in the sense that he's obsessed with this notion of not letting anyone die. You know what I mean? And what?
Yes.
And I guess essentially,
exactly.
Yeah. And the I guess in the end, the repercussions of that, like if he'd let Henry Cavill die in there, like that would have been like Lark dead or whatever, and that would essentially have like stopped everything from happening later on. Not that he knew at the time that he was this international terrorist or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think talking about the two of them together are a really good pair, Cruise and Cavill. And soon after, you get this great action sequence in the toilets, which almost feels like
it's almost the best scene of the film. It's so good.
It's really, really good. Yeah, and it does feel like something out of like The Matrix almost, or something, where the toilet is like, it's so white. It's almost like this toilet void that they're in.
Yeah.
It just visually, it looks so cool, and then to see like sort of an extended fist fight, like with like elements of like kind of martial arts and stuff thrown in there. There is a lot of like punching and kicking and stuff like that in the franchise in general, but I felt like this had a little more of a sort of martial arts twist to it, which was exciting. And just seeing Tom Cruise and Henry Cavill and the physical difference between the two of them. Like, Henry Cavill in this movie is like the Hulk or something, and they do such a good job with the sound design and like the way it's edited. Whenever he punch or kicks someone, you feel like all of this force coming with him. Whereas Ethan's a little more scrappy and a little more, I guess he's quicker and more nimble and that sort of thing, but doesn't have that brute strength. And I thought that was really cool to see the contrast between them.
Totally. That's another good example of the action being used to develop, or at least explore the characters and their differences a bit, instead of just being a normal fist fight. But just on the physical nature of that fight itself, and it's probably, like you said, to do with the sound design and everything, but I honestly can't think of another action scene, like fist fight like that feels so like visceral, and like it feels like they are actually trying to hurt one another. Sometimes when you watch a fight scene, that you can sort of tell it's like those they've got those gifs of in episode 1 Star Wars, and if you like actually see where the lightsabers were going to go, it misses them completely. Like, it's all just like a dance to make it look like an action scene. It's like they're swinging at their head, but not really. Whereas this feels like they're genuinely trying to hurt each other. And some of the things I don't know how they didn't, like when they throw each other through the mirrors and things, and even just went right at the beginning when Henry Cavill just fucking smashes the guy in the head with the laptop. Like, how did they even do that? Like, without breaking his head? Like,
even if that was like a soft prop, which I guess it had to be. Like, it looks like he's putting all of his effort into it. Yeah, I agree. Like, totally. That scene, and also like all the bathroom stuff in particular, there's so many moments where you're like squirming in your seat a little bit, like, that hurt. Like you're so right. It does feel so physical.
It's great,
and it's so amazing for that reason.
It's definitely, and it's also another thing I really liked about this film is that it also humanizes Ethan a bit through the action. Like, he's playing it a bit older and a bit hurt. Like, there's a time, like, I think he gets like throat punched in that, and after Henry Cavill gets taken down, Ethan's like on all fours, and the other guy's like ready to fight again, and he just looks up and he's like, "Fuck," like, I'm not ready for this. I'm still hurting.
Right. Yeah, that was a great point.
Like,
and doesn't he puts his hand up or something, like,
he's like, whoa, yeah,
give me a second. Or something?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that kind of stuff. That is very kind of Indiana Jones-esque.
Yes, and I feel like that happens throughout. Like, when he's running, like, he sort of, I think it's actually the moment where he broke his leg in real life, but like when he gets up, he sort of like stumbles into a run and then picks up pace to get full pelt. Like, you can just see he's a little bit worn now, and I don't know, I really like that. It added texture to it more so than him just being a superhuman spy machine. Yeah, that's such a good way to do it, and I hope they lean into that more if they make more, and I'm sure they will. To have a little to not hide the fact that he is getting older. I mean, he's still amazing. His like physicality and stuff for his age, and I'm not saying he should be in a wheelchair in the next film or anything, but I think it feels more honest. It feels more
honest. I guess, as you said, in this fantastical world where everyone's, can do amazing things, it almost raises the stakes because you see that sort of vulnerable side to him. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's just speaking of that, like the fight scene, that whole nightclub sequence, I really like that nightclub sequence, but in particular they have that like the entryway or whatever it is that's got all these mirrored like angular walls. It just looks really stunning, and they use it a couple of times. It's just an example of how beautiful this film can be and how well shot it is, I think.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. Just thinking about the bathroom sequence, and that's our introduction to the Rebecca Ferguson character again in this film. And I think she's great in this movie again, and her storyline gets a nice sort of few extra chapters added to it. But I was disappointed that she wasn't in it more. I thought she sort of stays on the sidelines in this film and just weaves in and out, and never really was there as much as I was hoping, because her character is so interesting. So, I mean, it seems to be they're very slowly setting up that she will kind of join the team maybe one day in a future film, or that, there's some sort of chemistry between her and Ethan as well. But yeah, she's so good that I just wish there was more of her in this.
I would agree with that. I feel like it's another example of, like, what I said earlier about this film being greater than the sum of its parts. Like, in terms of her character, definitely. Like, Rouge Nation is better. She gets more to do. She's a bit more of a badass. I guess it's also like the novelty of being introduced to her because she's just so great to watch on screen. Whereas this film, she doesn't get as much screen time, like you said. Though also just behind the scenes wise, I'm not sure how much this impacted it, but she was heavily pregnant through a lot of it. So apparently, there was a few examples where she had to use stunt doubles and stuff because she was very pregnant. So I don't know whether that influenced her. Like, maybe that's a reason why she wasn't given as much screen time. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sort of guessing there.
Yeah,
but perhaps
that makes sense.
I do really. I mean, as much as this is the first Mission Impossible film to continue the storyline from a previous film, I think this is also a great example, John, of what we often harp on about, or we have when we've spoken about, like, the Star Wars films, or at least the spin-offs, in that a film should stand on its own 2 feet. Like, I think you could watch this film and not have seen the previous film and it will still make complete sense. I think a good example of that is the opening, how it cold opens with that weird dream sequence of him getting married on the beach, which I think is, well, one, it's quite a departure from Mission Impossible. They haven't really done that sort of stuff before. But it's also like a good visual way to recap the previous events of the films without recapping the previous events and making it about the characters. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like a reminder for people who have seen the previous films that he's married and has a wife and it went badly and he's got that hanging over him. But for everyone else, it's just like a character beat, so we understand what Ethan's motivations are. Similarly, actually, and this goes back to how I liked that it took things from the first Mission Impossible film. We'd get something that we haven't since the first film, which is Ethan, like a flash forward where Ethan imagines what would happen if he pulls off the heist and sort of has to kill that cop. And it's a really, like, dark moment, and again, like, it's all very character based and it's like sort of drilling into him, which is good. I like all that. But it's also, it reminded me of what happens in the first film when he's talking on the phone and you are seeing something visually that actually isn't matching up with the dialogue, like using flash forwards and flashbacks in a novel way, which, like I said, hasn't happened in any of the previous films apart from the first one. So I really liked that. I thought it was like a nice callback and a nice consistency at this, as well as being quite unique.
That's a great point. And I must say too, in the sequence in Fallout where you see the heist, how the worst possible way it could go, which is them just shooting all the cops and stuff. For most of that sequence, I thought that was really happening.
Totally, same. Yep.
And I was like, oh, this is like dark very quickly, and like would he really do this? And so I mean that just speaks again to like the sort of quality of the filmmaking, that I didn't immediately go, well, this is a fantasy or something like that.
Speaking of that little heist moment, how cool is the shot of Solomon Lane in the truck when it falls into the water and the camera's kind of locked off and the water like comes up from the wrong way into it? Like it's such awesome. A cool shot.
Yeah, it looks so cool. Anytime like a film has that sort of, like 2001 or Interstellar or something like that, where you've got this like locked off sort of gravity defying, because you're staying one way while the world tips the other way. I love that kind of stuff. And with a body of water, it just looks so unnatural, and surreal almost. I thought that was really well done. And it's interesting, you brought up earlier that this movie feels a bit Nolan-esque, and that whole sequence clearly is sort of I don't want to say inspired, but very similar tonally to the Joker heists sort of sequence in Dark Knight. And I think the other reason it feels Nolan-ish is the score in this. I noticed was very kind of Hans Zimmer, like pounding drum, sort of oppressive instruments and stuff, and oppressive percussion, particularly. We do get lots of sort of heroic moments with the main theme, but not as much as there has been in other films. At least it felt like that to me. It felt a little darker. I
totally agree. I've got notes here as well about the score and how I think that also helps with the feeling of propulsion, and it like that heavy drums, and like it has that pushing the film forward. It really adds to that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost at times like it really immediately came to mind The Dark Knight when I was watching it, and I think it almost goes a little too close at times to that score.
Yep.
But I mean, that's almost a technique that was developed on The Dark Knight, which is this propulsive like score that's not really melodic at all. It's just kind of sound that's pounding you. And something that Christopher Nolan has taken since, I think, in various ways, which is like, especially with like percussion or like the ticking of clocks, and it's this weird mixture between music and sound design almost. And not that Mission Impossible goes quite that far, but there's elements of that in there.
Totally, definitely. How did you feel about the final helicopter action scene stuff? Because at the time I almost didn't like that third. It feels like it's almost wrapping up, and then it's got another whole act set in Kashmir so I wasn't even really expecting another. I thought the London chase was going to be like the final scene.
It feels like that. Yeah, it feels like that. And even the setting of he finally catches Henry Cavill, and they're like going up the elevator and stuff, and that is like a classic action movie finale setting, like this caged elevator, where they're going up and they're trying not to fall and all that sort of thing. But yeah, you're right. There's a whole other sequence after that.
So how did you feel that stacked up? Did you like the helicopter stuff?
I thought it was great. I think that was the moment where I was like actually laughing out loud with joy when I was in the cinema. When he gets in the helicopter, and that moment where he realizes he's carrying the payload thing. I mean, hold on. Before that, he has to climb up it, and those shots are just so cool.
That's the best.
And so real.
Work, definitely.
Like that's the plane moment,
totally.
of Rouge Nation, kind of reformatted here. Like, It's so cool, and like he's trying to like hook his legs up
Oh.
when he finally gets to it, and he can't do it and goes back down.
Man, even
and-
just when he slips, and like you said, he's like roped off or whatever, and it's safe, but your stomach just turns like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so impressive, and like from that moment forward, that whole sequence is so well edited.
So good, yeah.
That the tension. The first time I was watching it, like of course I know they're gonna save the day, but the tension, like I was on the edge of my seat, and then you got the other guys like trying to defuse the bomb, but then Solomon, that's the bad guy's name, right? Solomon, like he's there, and he's like really like
choking Benji,
painfully, like hanging Simon Pegg, and like it just all these different threads at once that are like, and then of course it comes down to that like the last second, and it's just that whole sequence I absolutely loved.
Totally agree.
Oh look, there's more moments I'm thinking of right now, but we'll go into those. I'll give you a chance.
No, I totally agree. It was a nice surprise that there was still this big action set piece that turned out to be the best of the film, and having said that, all the stuff before it was great as well, and it ends on a really good crescendo, this film, unlike Ghost Protocol or something that has the best thing in the middle of it. But yeah, and that's another good example of his character being a little bit like Indiana Jones or something, a bit out of his depth. Like you said, when he realizes he has the payload and he comes up with his plan and it just doesn't work. Like I love that it just... Yeah,
that was really surprising. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I felt like I could see that coming a mile away. Like as soon as he got on it, I'm like, okay, he's going to drop that's a good weapon to have, whether he like swings it into them or something. And the fact that that's just nullified, and then he has to come up with another like solution on the fly. All the while Henry Cavill's like hanging out of the plane with the machine gun,
a massive machine gun.
I love it. And it has that moment where he's like, they finally, Henry Cavill sees him or whatever, and then Tom Cruise is like, oh prick or something like that, and then Henry Cavill just brings the gun out, and you just like the look on Tom Cruise's face where he shits himself and like tries to like duck the helicopter down when the bullets spray. Like it's such a great moment.
Isn't there? There's also a moment somewhere in there. I can't remember what he says, but it's either there or somewhere in the film where Henry Cavill says something like, "Why won't this guy die?" or like, or something like that, or how is he still alive, or so. And you can just imagine, like, it's so true because Ethan Hunt is just like magical guy that you think you've gotten rid of him, and then 10 minutes later he's like fucking running after you, and you're like, Jesus Christ, go away.
Totally, yeah. I think that maybe it is in that scene, but that is a good example of that, because his character would have assumed that, Tom Cruise, like, what are the chances he's going to be there and in a helicopter, like, right behind, like, he thought his plan was good,
exactly,
he thought he was all done.
Yeah, like, it's quite funny. But that sequence, it keeps escalating. I love it crashes, and then what is the order again there? Like they crash, they both tumble out, and then they're both on the top of the cliff, right? He gets his helicopter shot up and stuff, and then they go into the cloud bank and all that stuff, and then he crashes into them, and they both have that crash, which is actually really another example of it being really, it had like the locked off camera when it's, I mean, obviously the outside's CGI, but it's like, it's really brutal, like the way it flips around and he's like smashing around inside the cab. Yeah. And then he's in it, and then the other one rolls down and knocks them into the wedge. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And then they come...
Yeah, the wedge thing.
Yeah, but then they come out of the wedge, and then they're on the flat bit of rock where they like fist fight.
That's right.
And the helicopter's or maybe they climb up, I can't remember. But because there's a helicopter hanging off at that point.
Yes,
by
and
the hook.
The hook. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's just like that whole section like keeps upping the ante, and it's like a amusement park ride. That wedge moment was
totally.
like, I was like, what the hell's going to happen next?
Yeah.
Seriously.
I mean, it really is. It's like it really skirts the edge of being ridiculous. Like that is almost over the top that it's laughable, but maybe it's because it's so late in the film, or it's just handled so well, and most of it is obviously it's a lot of CGI, but most of it feels very practical, that like I was at least willing to go with it and just have a great time.
Yeah, totally agree. I think I do think at that point, like, it's pretty cartoony, but they've earned it. You know, it's like the dessert of the movie.
Totally.
It's like, here, like, have the sugar now. Like, it's just so fun. Or just like I loved how. Firstly, I loved that Henry Cavill's face gets all like burnt off and stuff. I mean, if we're going to talk about the Dark Knight again,
that's very good point.
Similarity there. But just to have him like almost physically be this kind of like hulking monster at the end, it's just pissed off at Ethan Hunt because he's just, you know, really ruined his plans. And so they have their fight and the tension's ratcheting up and everything, and you've got the shots of the well, I guess they flip over then, like, and they're on the side of the cliff because they're trying to climb back up, but the rope keeps slipping, the hook keeps coming off and stuff, and then you get like this, you know, really brutal but extremely satisfying death for Henry Cavill, where the hook in the head, smashes his face in. But you don't really see it. It's very quick, but you kind of feel the impact of it, and it's very violent. For I mean, not that these movies aren't violent, but they sort of skirt the line between what you actually see, and I thought that was just really, really well done. Yeah,
definitely, I completely agree. It's just like, as cartoony as the helicopter stuff gets, and a little bit CGI-y, that fist fight on that like flat rock face is like so clearly done for real, and the wide like helicopter shots of them just like fighting right near the edge of that cliff is again like turns my stomach a little bit when I watch it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just I mean, other than outside of Nolan, like no other filmmaker or big budget filmmaker seems to want to do practical stuff like McQuarrie's doing with these films. Like, it makes such a difference. I wish more filmmakers would do it. Yeah,
totally. It pays off so much, and I think like it pays off in how well these movies do. Like, they get good word. I mean, there's so many aspects that go into them, obviously, but part of the positive response to them, and why, you know, you tell your friends to go and see it, is because you get that adrenaline rush, because you're like, you know, sapient brain can see another human that is clearly in an actually dangerous environment, and that does something to you that even the best CGI ever can never replicate.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, before we wrap up, I feel like we've been gushing a little bit. Was there anything you'd like to add to sort of temper the mood so I don't get carried away with my love fest?
Well, I guess, look, overall, I, you know, obviously really, really enjoyed this movie. As I said at the start, I think some of the cheese, like, there's only a couple of moments I can think of now, but it almost does push things too far sometimes into cartoon territory. And I did leave thinking, if they do another one, and I've said like 5 times during this review, I hope they do, I wonder, will it perhaps be too cartoony the next time, or too...
mean in terms of the action? Like there was cartoony action moments, or was it dialogue?
But action and dialogue stuff. So the 2 moments that come to mind in terms of sort of drama or character is the opening dream sequence, and then Ethan waking up in a cold sweat. I feel like, you know, that's like a silly cliche at this point for action movies to have, and particularly to open that way felt a bit too much to me. And the other example was so the other example was when he's chasing Henry Cavill across London, finally reaches him, they're on the elevator, and Henry Cavill just happens to have like a photo of Michelle Monaghan of his wife. Like, was he just carrying that around just for that moment? Did we ever had to show it to him? That was just like, why is he carrying that? That's ridiculous. And then, as we touched on before, like, I loved the helicopter stuff, but if it went just like 1% more, you know, over the top, it would have been too much. And so, I mean, they're not really harsh criticisms, but they're moments where I thought, I think that might be pushing it just a little too far.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think the dream stuff, I understand what you're saying about the dream stuff, but it worked for me, like I said, as a visual way of recapping certain things that you couldn't. I mean, you could have done with an exposition dump, but I would prefer that they did it that way.
Totally, yeah.
But I can see how that can come off as a bit cheesy and over the top. There was the one moment for me, actually, that didn't work very well was the moment when there is an exposition dump when Ving Rhames kind of explains Ethan's relationship with Michelle Monaghan to Rebecca Ferguson.
Yep.
And it's meant to be a meaningful, like, heartfelt moment, and it just felt a little clunky, I thought. He was just literally explaining what Ethan's past was, which, again, I don't know, I guess it's maybe needed, but like I was saying, I think the dreams were trying to do that in a much more eloquent or, concise way, even if it perhaps wasn't as, original or something.
Yeah, and it's more interesting, like, even if they're using that sort of cliche idea of like a dream and then like waking up in a cold sweat, at least it's visual storytelling,
exactly, yeah,
not just someone
and character-based stuff too. It's not just like
needed
needless plot details. At least it's enhancing it in some way. Yeah.
You have reminded me of another moment I thought didn't work. Like, it wasn't terrible, but there's a moment where Ethan meets or is having a discussion with the White Widow character. And, she's kind of, a bit mysterious and elusive and all this sort of thing. And she kisses him.
Yeah, on the river. I know
and it's meant to be a bit perplexing. It's not like he's into it or anything. He's kind of puzzled. But it still felt a little like, well, we've got to let the man be kissed by, a beautiful woman. And something I really liked about Rouge Nation was, although there's chemistry between him and the Rebecca Ferguson character, there's never a moment like that where they're, making out by the sunset or something like that. And so I know it's a character touch in this, but I still felt a bit like it didn't work.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. I had a similar thought the first time I watched it as well. Played better the second time, and if you lean into the fact that she's just meant to be a bit of a weirdo, like a bit, and it's meant to be a bit creepy, like the way he doesn't reciprocate. Yeah. Like, I think it works, but I agree. I had a similar reaction. And I mean, like you said, the Rebecca Ferguson relationship is so much better. And again, it's the same thing in this film. It never falls into that trap at all. Like, it doesn't. Their relationship is so mutually respectful. And the sort of fine line it walks between them. The chemistry between them and the antagonism, like, it's really well handled.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, we're sort of wrapping up, but that is handled really well, and I love that they can work together and clearly really care about each other and probably want to kiss each other, but they never get a chance to, and then suddenly they're kind of on separate missions, physically putting each other in danger.
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole car chase sequence in this movie where she's trying to kill Solomon, but Ethan's like collateral damage almost in that.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting.
Speaking of the car chase, that is the only other example where I think the CGI takes a little away from what is otherwise an incredible action scene. Like, I can tell a lot of the traffic and the cars in that motorbike scene are CGI, which is a little bit of a shame. I mean, I think it's similar to the London scene. I swoon a little bit for both of those moments. London one in particular, because I'm living here now and I know everywhere, and that's like an accurate way to run to the Tate, where he ends up on, like, I just know all that. It's really cool seeing it all on screen.
Yeah.
But also, like, we've been to France, John. Like, we've been to, like, similar places like that, and you know what those little cobblestone streets are like and how fucking crazy it would be to ride a motorbike around there at full speed. Totally. So I think it's enhanced and made more thrilling having been to those places. But the CGI-ness of the cars does take a little bit away. I almost wish they had less traffic or something, or, and just done it for real.
Exactly.
I don't know, but I mean, it's still a good
Yeah.
action set piece. I think it still works, but
Yeah, and there's some great like car maneuvering stuff in there, like reversing and kind of spinning. There's one like where there's like a small flight of stairs and he kind of reverses and turns at the same time or something, and that was incredible.
Or even when there's a little moment where she's on the bike and he's in the car and she's trying to catch up and she like goes past where he turned and down through like a series, like it's almost like corridor of pillars, and the way it's shot from the side and the sounds of the pillars whipping past, it's like the sense of speed
I noticed that too.
is like mind-blowing. It's really impressive.
Really smart sound design there, because it's like you hear each sort of individual one, like this burst of wind or
and the way it changes the sound of like the engine or whatever, I don't know, just it's like really really effective whatever they've done there to give it a sense of speed. Cool. Was there any other downsides or anything else you wish they'd improved?
No, I think those are the main gripes I have. Certainly I haven't written anything else down. No. I mean, did you have any other negatives?
No, I mean, I think, the two things that I brought up, and I can see where you're coming from a lot of things, but I just had such a good time. And like, I mean, I'm also maybe a little bit biased in terms of the craft of it, like the practicalness of it. Like I said, other than Nolan, I can't think of any other filmmaker doing this. And plus, the look of it, shot on film, I love. That's just like, put that into my veins, that's exactly the kind of stuff that I love. Totally. And then when you layer on top of that like incredible action, a fun, insane plot, like that moment when when they think they've had when they catch Lane and then Henry Cavill's officially revealed to be the bad guy, even though we as an audience know earlier than that. Like that is like literally like an 8-time double cross or something. Like it's nuts. Yeah, I know. Like I was like, totally. I was like sitting there like grinning in my seat. Like I love that kind of shit. Like if you're gonna do a spy film, like do that. Like I love it. Yeah, it's so great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even just that moment where he's got Solomon Lane in the chair and he thinks it's him, and then he parrots that line that Angela Bassett has said about like, oh, the IMF's just like men in Halloween and he stops like halfway through and then reaches down and it's such a great like when the penny drops. I love that. It's so good. It's really cool. And I think this film is this series is kind of, I was thinking when I came out, sort of old school in a way. I mean, you've brought up being practical in terms of the stunts and effects and shot on film, but also like this kind of globe-trotting, handsome leading man sort of, movie star that just is just like a, superhuman. We don't see a lot of these sort of action films anymore. Yeah, and I really like that and appreciate it. I think it's not... These films aren't cynical, and they have, adult ideas in them and dark themes, but they're very earnest in the sense that they're just action movies. And there's character stuff in there and certain interesting ideas, but really they're not trying to be more than what they are, I think. And they're not cash grabs either. I think there's a lot of passion and talent that goes into them. And we have this many now because, aside from, perhaps the second one, because they're good and the people involved really care about them. And that's just good. It's just they're fun to watch. They're kind of a joyful movie experience. And I think we don't get that a lot in action filmmaking these days, and a lot of action filmmaking now is rolled into like a superhero thing, or even Star Wars or something like that, with these really big, like worldwide kind of $billion franchises. And I know it's ridiculous to compare Mission Impossible and say that feels small and like honest, but it does. And I think I really hope they continue to make them. Completely agree. I mean, I feel like there has to be another. I feel like Christopher McQuarrie has to come back and do, even though he said he doesn't want to, he has to come back and do another one with Solomon Lane again, and it'll be like a little mini trilogy within the Mission Impossible franchise. Like, it'd be nuts because they leave him alive again at the end of this. Like, I feel like there has to be an end to that little relationship that they've built. And man, I cannot wait to see that if that is indeed what happens. Thanks for listening to the PrePost Film Review. We'd love to hear what you guys thought of Mission Impossible Fallout. Did you love it as much as I did, and John? Or did you think it was a weaker entry into the franchise? We'd love to hear. You can email us at prepostfilmreview@gmail.com, and we try to reply to all the emails that we get, so shoot us one over. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. You can also give us a like over on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at PrePostFR. But most importantly, almost forgot, if you guys could subscribe to us on whatever podcasting software you're using to listen here, whether it's iTunes or Stitcher or whatever you use. Particularly iTunes would be great if you could subscribe there and leave us a little review. Give us a little 5 stars. That would just be beautiful. We'd really appreciate that.
That would be amazing. We're also on Letterboxd. If you have a Letterboxd account, you can find John and myself on there. You can see what we've been watching outside of the pod. There are links to both of our profiles in the show notes. And you can join us next episode, when we're going to be chatting about the new Damien Chazelle film, his follow-up to La La Land, John, which was my favourite film of that year.
I'm so excited
First
for this.
Man. Expectations are very high. This is going to be a good one.
Yes.
It's such a good film, man. It's been so long that I've been so like amped by just like a fun, good film. Do you know what I mean? Like, not a highbrow intellectual film, or just like a really fucking well made. Oh shit! I fell off my chair.